Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about the summit that took place in South Korea between President Trump and President Xi Jinping. We're going to be talking about what that means for the tech industry. We got some big developments, and we're also going to be talking about rate cuts, tariffs, and inflation. If you're new here to the channel, my name's Lucas. I talk about finance, geopolitics, and economics. So if you're new here, make sure you're subscribed and you hit the like button here on YouTube. Make sure the algorithm likes my videos and recommend more of them to you. So let's jump right into it. Earlier this week, President Trump went to South Korea for a summit where he held a 90-minute talk with President Xi Jinping from China. During the summit, they discussed a multitude of topics, including the US-China trade restrictions, especially around AI chips, the high-end chips from Nvidia and AMD. Today, we're going to be mostly talking about Nvidia, since they are at the forefront of this trade war between the US and China. Nvidia, which a couple years ago made nearly 100% of the high-end chip market in China, now claims that their China business is at zero. According to CEO Jason Huang, the Chinese market made up around 13 to 20% of their total revenue. So needless to say, this comes as a big hit to Nvidia's revenue. For those unfamiliar with the current US to China trade war, especially around AI, since 2022, the Biden administration had placed export restrictions on high-end AI chips from Nvidia to China to prevent the enhancement of China's military capacities, surveillance systems, and AI development. In 2025, as Trump took office, controls over AI chips exports to China became even stricter. Although since the beginning of the year, the administration has gone back and forth on these restrictions on these chips to China. Now Beijing also has restrictions of their own. In August of this year, the Trump administration finally caved in and allowed Nvidia to sell their H20 chips to China, while the government was going to take a 15% cut of these sales. Investors rallied over the news, but the excitement was short-lived, as in September of this year, China directed its own tech industry, including companies like ByteDance, Alibaba, and others, to halt purchase, testing, and usage of US-made chips, such as those made by Nvidia and AMD. China's goal is for their tech industry to mainly rely on domestic-made chips from Huawei. I'm sure some of you may know that in the beginning, China was heavily dependent on Nvidia when it came to training their models, specifically their DeepSeek R1, which broke the internet when it first came out. And that's really what raised a lot of concerns about this AI race between the US and China. And although the intentions from the US government may be good and may be to protect national security, by making it harder for Nvidia to continue growing their market in China, they're creating this pocket, this space where companies like Huawei can step in and take over Nvidia's market share. As we talked about earlier, a few years ago, Nvidia used to make up almost 100% of the high-end chips going to China, with the whole AI industry in China relying on these chips from Nvidia. And as Chinese tech companies are forced to adapt, this creates an opportunity for Huawei to ascend as a leader in the AI world, not only in China, but also in the Indo-Pacific and perhaps even around the world, as we see more countries aligning with the East. So long-term, China's AI companies are bound to eventually run solely on homegrown silicon, potentially flipping the script on US dominance. Aside from the AI talks, Trump claims the meeting went 12 out of 10, with tariffs on Chinese imports getting lowered from 57 to 47%, and with China committing to a large-scale purchase of our soybean. This was also a topic of discussion in recent weeks, as China was one of our biggest importers of soybean, and there were concerns around the US hostility to China and China finding soybean alternatives in countries like Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, and so on. China also committed to cracking down on fentanyl exports coming into the US, and they also committed to suspend their restrictions on the exports of rare earth minerals. A lot of these minerals are crucial for the tech industry. A lot of them cannot be found here in the US, so we do rely on these Chinese supply chains and these Chinese resources for our own tech industry, our own defense sector. So China removing this restriction on rare earth minerals, it's really good news. Now, this comes as an exchange for the US lowering its restrictions on our own technology industry going into Chinese markets. Trump announced plans to visit Beijing in April of 2026, with Xi Jinping also committing to visiting the US sometime later in the year. Now, in my opinion, this marks a positive change in US to China diplomacy, and this is the first time Xi Jinping and Trump have met in person since 2019. As I said earlier, a lot of these companies like Nvidia, they're hoping for a more relaxed approach when it comes to US and China relationships, specifically around the AI industry. As many of you guys know, Nvidia is a major superpower when it comes to AI AI right now. And if we lose such a large market like China, it creates an opportunity for Chinese companies to arise to the occasion. We already see Chinese companies taking over market share and other Chinese allies in South America, for example, where a lot of their network infrastructure is set up using Chinese technology from Huawei and so on. That's it on AI. Let's talk a little bit about rate cuts. So as you guys saw on October 29, the Federal Reserve moved to cut rates by another 25 base points. This is the second consecutive rate cut by the Fed. And this move comes as concerns shift from inflation to the weakening labor market in the US. The US labor market is showing clear signs of cooling, with long-term joblessness rising to 1.5 million people out of a job for 27 weeks straight. Now, this is the highest this number has ever been since late 2022. When we first came out of the pandemic, there was a surge in employment and new jobs created and people switching jobs. And that was mainly because everybody was locked in their house during the pandemic. As people are coming out, more jobs are created, more people are re-entering the workforce. And it looks like as of right now, we are seeing a major slowdown from that boom. And the Federal Reserve, their main goals, as you guys know, is inflation, but also unemployment. Inflation is still hovering around 3% with the latest numbers from September. That's very far from the Fed's goal of 2%. But guys, it looks like inflation is going to continue ticking up. We have the Fed shifting focus now to employment and lowering rates. And with lower rates, not only is this going to speed up the economy and increase prices to go up, but we also have not seen the effects of tariffs so far. According to Deloitte, right before the tariffs went into effect, a lot of importers placed bulk orders and really stocked up on their inventory to avoid the rising costs by the tariffs. Soon enough, though, we are going to be running out of inventory, and these importers are going to have to then eat the cost of the tariff. It's expected that 60% of the tariff costs will be passed on to consumers, and we should start seeing the effects of that by late 2025 and then early into 2026. A lot of people have been talking about tariffs recently, and it's so funny seeing people that have never talked about economics before. Out of a sudden, now they're expert in economics and in trade. In reality, I spoke about this in a recent video I made. It is not black and white like that. Yes, tariffs, in theory, they do increase prices, but oftentimes, especially when you're competing in a free market, a lot of these companies, they're concerned about increasing prices right away, and they want to stay competitive. If none of their competitors are increasing prices, by them passing on the tariff costs to their consumers, they're pretty much pricing themselves out of the market. So we're going to see these companies slowly increasing their prices as they really have no choice, but a lot of them are also just eating the tariff costs. That's bleeding into their profit margins. They're finding other ways to afford the tariffs, such as layoffs and cost reductions. But needless to say, eventually we might be seeing some higher prices at the checkout. Now, everybody gets upset with tariffs. In reality, in my opinion, tariffs are actually really good. My concern is Trump is introducing all these tariffs and so on, and we really have only 3 years left of this administration. What is the guarantee that the next administration that comes around is going to keep these tariffs? Because if they don't, then really this was all a waste. A lot of the problems that we have right now is that the US is too reliant on the East, especially on Asia when it comes to semiconductors, and we do need to make things at home. Manufacturing jobs, they definitely have to make a comeback to America. Maybe we won't be making clothes here in the US anymore, but I do think that there's a lot of sectors in the economy that can be manufactured here domestically, and we don't necessarily need to rely on foreign countries for every single aspect of our economy. So that's the latest when it comes to tech, inflation, and rates. There's a lot going on, guys. A lot going on. But that's going to be it for me. If you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you can see more videos like this. Let me know your thoughts about the economy, about Nvidia, about rate cuts, inflation. Let me know your thoughts here in the comments. I would love to chat with you guys. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.